Good evening. It is time for some more Star Wars. So we're still on the Lost Tribes of the Sith. We've got two more books. This one is, really, they're not much more than short stories as far as these last week and this week. So this one is a very short, also, just like uh, Pantheon was. This one is called Secrets, and it only has 5 chapters as well. So I'm going to read the whole thing tonight. The last one, I think it's called Pandemonium, has like 17 chapters, so that'll be a multi-night read. But this one we'll get through in one night. So without further ado, let's jump on into it. Excuse me. So Secrets takes place at 3000 BBY. I've said it before, but if you don't know what BBY is, that's before the Battle of Yavin, which is the first Death Star was destroyed at the Battle of Yavin in the original movie, A New Hope. So that is sort of the year zero, is that battle um, for the timeline. So, all right, here we go. Like all Sith on Kesh during the time of the Rot, the Hiltz family had ambition. It was just never very big on execution. Varner Hiltz's father spent years earning the confidence of the leader of his local faction. He took great care in selecting the shikar blade intended for his liege's back, but the elder Hiltz used somewhat less care in fastening the dagger's sheath, and the glass blade fell from his belt and buried itself in his ankle. He was dead in a gangrenous month. A mercifully short time to have to endure the nickname Slippery Hiltz. Unfazed, the widow Hilt soldiered on, targeting the faction leader for seduction the very next week. Minions carefully delivered her to the leader's private bedchambers in a massive ceremonial urn. Unfortunately, the lid was stubborn, and no one had told her the leader was spending the month campaigning in the high country. However, she did achieve her surprise, if the horror of the cleaning servants counted. Varner Hiltz had lived longer than either of them, rising quietly, if inoffensively, to a position of responsibility within the tribe. He'd worked every day in the greatest palace on the mainland and had viewed Yaru Corson's testament not once but twice. He'd ventured closer than anyone had in years to the temple that held Omen, the ship that had brought Corson and the lost tribe to Kesh. And now he was about to be killed by a plant. Jay, Hiltz called, struggling upside down with a thorny web of vines. Every motion caused the bonds to tighten around the old man's ribs. He spotted his assistant looking down at him from atop the green-tressed stonework. Jay, cut me down. Black eyes blinked. With what, caretaker? With anything. Oh, the purple-faced Kashiri vanished for a moment before reappearing with his satchel. The lightsaber you found? Whoa, no! Hiltz flared the fingers of his free hand in panic. Predictably, Jay was holding the weapon by the wrong end. You'll kill yourself turning it on. Jay knelt closer to where Hiltz was dangling. Should I pass it down to you, then? No, look, go find a sharp rock, Hiltz said, settling as best he could in his knotty prison. I'll just hang around here. Hiltz listened to the Kashiri skitter off and cursed himself for his wild scheme. No one had dared approach the mountain temple in centuries, and now a 60-year-old archivist and his cowardly clerk would do it? During a week, no less, when every settlement on the continent of Keshta roiled with riotous convulsions? Hiltz shook his head, ignoring the scratches from the vine wrapped around his chin. He'd been mad to make the journey. And the journey had been maddening. Hiltz had returned first to his museum in the capital city of Tav, where he'd long preserved the ancient maps of Omen's temple. But pillagers had struck the place, burning every scrap of parchment in the archives. Everything breakable had been broken. The sight of the smashed sandpipes had driven Jay to tears. Hiltz had been prepared for that. The self-destructive rampage had been going non-stop since the tribe's discovery that their ancestors hadn't been conquerors, but slaves to aliens. Nonetheless, the sight of so many human corpses lying in the streets had unnerved him. No Sith saw any single life as precious, but their species as a whole certainly was. The survivors of Omen had been so few in number in the beginning, now many generations increase had been lost. No, how many generations increase had been lost? Could they ever recover? The Forbidden Temple might hold the solution, but Hiltz had to get there first. Avoiding the roving bands of Sith thugs on killing sprees, it was why he'd brought Jay along. Kashiri families that once worshipped humans now feared them. None would have granted him shelter, but any Sith who would travel with meek Jay Vold was probably not someone on a murderous rampage. They'd taken refuge in Kashiri shacks in daylight hours, making their way west at night. Excuse me. The journey was long but necessary. The temple sat atop the Takara Mountains at the northern tip of a long peninsula running parallel to the mainland. It would have been a short hop over the inlet for an Uvak, but nothing could get Hiltz on the back of one of those flying beasts. They'd taken the long way along the southern coast before turning up the hostile spit of land. There was no shelter here, nor sustenance, just as well as Hiltz had tasted only his own stomach acid since the riots began. Finally, they arrived at the base of the blocks, massive granite barriers lodged in a narrow pass by Nita Corson to prevent anyone from accessing the forbidden heights on foot. With each cube 10 meters tall, they gave the impression of a staircase for the gods, a formidable obstacle indeed, but sometime in the intervening centuries, a hardy foliage had taken root in the stones, crevices, strong vines providing a way up. Or a way to hang upside down until you hemorrhage and die, Hiltz thought. He looked up. Where was that blasted Kashiri? A light flashed in the sky. Weary eyes focused. A reflection? But from what? Here, caretaker. No sooner did Hiltz hear the squeaky voice when he felt a violent tug, and then he was being dragged up the side of the blocks by his legs. Jay, what are you doing? The Kashiri groaned, pulling on a clutch of vines wrapped around his spindly fingers. Hiltz righted himself and clambered atop the barrier, where he spent a full minute gasping for breath. Rolling over, he saw Jay had found a series of post holes in the stone surface, the base for some scaffold centuries earlier. Each hole was large enough to accommodate a Kashiri foot, allowing the frail clerk some mechanical advantage as he hauled his master up the side. This is the last barrier, Jay said, wiping blood from his palms and looking behind them. A modest scramble down led to an open trail up the gorge and to the temple mountain further above. Hey, Vesper! I learned something about Plato the other day. If a dialogue ends abruptly, like the first one we read, that means the speaker, wasn't up to answering the question. Like Socrates will say something like, yeah, virtue comes from the gods, and the reason you have so much is because they like you more than most people. Okay, that's an interesting thing to know. And welcome in, by the way. Okay, where were we? Um, I lost my place. Oh, and the open trail up the gorge. Okay, here we go. But Hiltz's attention was higher still. Look there! In the eastern sky, an uvak beat its wings as it arced downward toward the temple. Hilt squinted. There was a rider aboard. Another flash of light, a reflection like before. On metal, poor poor Kesh, that usually meant one thing, the handle of a lightsaber. Hiltz frowned and looked toward the temple. We'd better get going. Standing, he pulled the remaining shreds of vine from his portly frame. With renewed purpose, he took a step forward, directly into a post hole. Caretaker! The granite felt cool on Hilt's face. I've decided, Jay, that first we're going to rest here, for a while. The Kashiri didn't argue. You must finish the job of removing the tribe from this mountain. Our destiny, for now, lies in ruling the part of Kesh that lives. Okay, so we've switched places here. So Yaru Korson had instructed his daughter in the testament, and his decree had been followed and respected by a people that respected nothing. Hiltz marveled as he stepped from the rocky path onto the wind-swept stone of the site. Oh, okay, now I'm with it. Sith would look for any edge they could find in their squabbles, yet none had ever returned here to his knowledge. It could have been superstition, but Hiltz thought it more likely that they understood the futility of returning. What advantage could be found here that Corson and the other passengers of Omen wouldn't already have taken? And yet, that was his quest. Thousands of meters below, all across the continent to the east, his civilization was in the process of expunging itself. 20 warring factions had already destroyed the Sith state, but the revelation of their common and lowly origin had left every human soul detached and despondent. 1,000 years' sclerosis could be survived, but not another week of self-mutilation. What can I find here that no one else has? Hilt wondered anew as he looked to the twin spires flanking the royal residence far ahead. Vanity had led him to this, surely, but maybe it wasn't such a crazy dream. Anyone else would have looked here for a weapon, some ancient technology from the stars. Hiltz was looking for a message, something Corson had hinted at in his dying words, something that could lead the tribe back onto a singular path. The true powers behind the throne, Corson had said. Should disaster befall, remember that. Jay stepped fearfully onto the southern terrace of the Holy Palace. Shabby stone buildings lined the sides, worn down by wind, sun, and neglect. It's bigger than I imagined, caretaker. That's fine, Hilt said, ignoring the sore ankle as he strode confidently ahead. I know where we are. And he did. He didn't have the maps now, but they'd been with him for years. He'd committed to memory this lower terrace where the service personnel had lived. North past the Uvak stables were the steps to the middle terrace, with its training academy, dormitories, storehouses, and wardroom. Up more stairs would be the outer colonnade, where Yaru Korson had held his public court. Then finally the quadrangle of the main plaza formed by the royal residence to the west, the watchtower and guardhouse to the east, and the temple dome to the north. Part of the upper plaza actually sat atop Omen's honored place of rest. The structure had been built around and atop the damaged ship to protect it. Just thinking about Omen brought more spring to Hiltz's step. He didn't even blanch when he saw the multitude of stairs to the middle terrace. Anyone looking at the edifice from afar would assume it had been built by a culture that loved climbing. Indeed, it had been. Come on, my boy, Hiltz said. Keep up the pace. Okay, we'll see what Vesper has to say here. Socrates is meant to be a contrast to the hero like Achilles. He represents wisdom and virtue instead of violence. And one of the major themes of the Republic is about eros and the different kinds of things people have eros for, like knowledge or honor or more base desires. Yeah, That's kind of what I got out of it. Back to the reading. The body was freshly killed. One quick, inartful slash to the throat had been the end of the Uvak. Hilt studied the smelly beast baking in the noon sun. It surely was the creature he'd seen approaching, slain here right in the middle of the terrace. I guess the stables didn't suit our visitor, Hilt said. Jay cowered behind him. Do you want the weapon? Hilt looked around, feeling through the force. Something was here. Yes, he said. Give it to me. Jay fumbled through the knapsack and produced the lightsaber. Hiltz hadn't owned one as a caretaker. What was the point? But on their way out of Tav, he'd pilfered one from the corpse of a massive warrior. He never knew what he might need. Do you know how to use it? Jay asked. Sure. Just get them to stand right in front of me and I'll turn it on. Levity didn't lift the unease. Hilt wasn't practiced in the use of the Force for defense, either. He'd had the same training as a boy that other tribe members had, but apart from deflecting chunks of falling aqueduct, he'd had little use for the Force's physical manifestations in recent decades. Still, he knew a bad feeling when he felt it, and this wasn't more acid in his throat. In fact, he recognized this particular sting. The wardroom, Hilt said, sensing the source of the twinge up ahead. Stay outside. If you hear trouble, run and never return. There may have been no statues of Sela Corson in the palace in Tav, but the figure in the bas relief carved outside the hospital was unmistakable. As Yaru Corson's wife, Sela was the mother of the tribe, but before that she'd been Devor Corson's wife and the mother of a traitor. Hiltz had never seen Sela in any depictions, but looking at the smooth skin, the coiffed hair, I guess, and the perfect figure in the marble, he knew he'd seen her twin, and recently. Ileana Mirko, he called, stepping through the... Oh, he called. Ileana Mirko, he called, stepping through the doorway. It's Caretaker Hiltz. I know you're here. I think we should talk. And that's the end of the first chapter. Like I said, they're all very short. We'll be through this whole book, short story, novella, whatever you want to call it, tonight. So, chapter 2. Ileana? Ileana! Hiltz gaped as he saw the figure in the shadows. The last 2 weeks had been hard on everyone on Kesh, but he barely recognized the leader of the Sisters of Sela. Ileana sat huddled in the cold corner of the dark storeroom, gently caressing a skull. She sobbed gently, not registering his presence. Hiltz looked back nervously to the outer room and its row of marbled surgical tables, and then down to the lightsaber in his hand. He clipped it back to his belt. Ileana Mirko was a dangerous faction leader, but the figure before him was something else. Her once bright hair was dirty and tangled. Her once flawless skin was smudged with dirt and blood, and amazingly, with something he'd never thought he'd see on her face, tears. She died here, Ileana said, bringing the skull to her forehead. Alone. Hilt looked down. Here in the cool darkness, some portion of a skeleton had survived, clumped in a corner. Realizing who the skull belonged to, he spoke cautiously. How do you know it's Sela? I know, Ileana whispered. Opening her gloved hand, she revealed a ring bearing the Corson family seal, a Tapani commitment band. They just left her here, Hilt said, kneeling to look at the remains. The femurs appeared whole, but only tiny shards remained of the bones beneath. Time hadn't done this, he thought, and as he noticed the cane nearby, history fell into place. He'd known that Sela's betrayal had been exposed, and that Nita Corson had punished her mother. But the records never said whether it was exile or death. Now the blocks down below made sense. The barrier would keep a crippled Sela here as much as it kept others out. Exile, he said quietly. She was betrayed, Ileana angrily blinked back tears. She deserved better than this. And she'd still be dead, whatever memorial she had. Watching the woman gently return the skull to the floor, Hilt rose and stepped back. "You're alone here. What happened to the Sisters of Sela?" Ileana kept her face to the wall as she composed herself. "We fought hard when the factions fell upon one another, but then we fell apart, just like everyone else." She shook her head and looked back with golden eyes shot with red. "We had nothing to follow. Sela was born a slave." "I guess so." "I know it," she said, balling her gloved fists in anger. "As a girl, I once had a force vision of Sela. She asked me to avenge her." Hiltz thought about the bas relief outside. "So that's how you knew how she did her hair?" "But what I never told anyone is what she was doing in the vision," she said. "There was this monster, this red monster, looking just like the Ravelin in the message, and she was washing its feet." She lashed out with the force, shattering the precious bones against the wall. "Its stinking, disgusting feet!" Hilt nodded. Yes, he'd want to be avenged for something like that. Ileana pushed past him and stomped into the wardroom. Apparently some of the other sisters had had similar visions. She rubbed her eye clean of a lingering tear and then flicked it away, as if it were only grit. "We couldn't stand together long after that." Among the marble buyers, Ileana paused. In a flash, her hand went to her lightsaber. "There's someone out there," she snapped, eyes on the doorway. "They're here." Hiltz hurried into the room past her. "It's okay. He's with me." He called out for his assistant. Jay timidly appeared from outside. Ileana lowered her lightsaber and rolled her eyes. "The figurer? The world's coming to an end and you're still keeping pets?" "I've got to have something to take care of," Hiltz said. "It's my job, after all." He interposed himself between the woman and Jay. "But what did you mean, they're here?" "They're looking for me," Ileana said. "Who?" "Everyone. Corson Bentando. What's left of Force 57. Those crazy Golden Destiny people," she said. "Everyone who's left. All the final grudges are being settled before we all die." "They followed you?" "They will," Ileana said. "I took pieces out of enough of them before I left. I was flying west the last time their trackers saw me. There's nothing farther west than this." Hilt twirled Jay around and shoved him back toward the door. "We don't have much time," he said. "Follow me. I'll explain as we go." The tall woman glared defiantly at him. "I'm not your little clerk. Why should I follow you anywhere?" The caretaker stared up at her. "Because we may need help to find what we're looking for, and you're at a dead end. You said so yourself." He gestured toward the exit. "Meanwhile, I actually have a plan." Ileana breathed deeply and stepped toward the exit. "I'm sure it's a foolish plan," she said as she passed. "My, you're a hateful thing," Hilt said. "Do you come by this naturally?" She looked down at him and gave a rumpled smile. "Forged myself in Sela's spirit." "The woman whose skull you just kissed and then smashed against a wall," he wanted to say. Hilt smirked. Ileana had chosen Sela to idolize, as anyone nasty would have done. He'd never trust her. Sith never trust anyone anyway, but he was beginning to understand her. "Make for the portal up ahead," he said. "At the least you'll see something no one alive has seen." Hiltz watched as Ileana traced the contours of the dark metal from with her fingertips. So something did exist that could impress her. The Ship of Destiny. "It's wonderful," she said. Omen sprawled beneath the arched ceilings of the temple, gently lit by the glow rods Jay had ignited. It had long been said that Omen resembled a Lanvarok, an ancient Sith wrist weapon, but no one on Kesh had ever seen a Lanvarok, nor had anyone seen Omen for centuries. The founders had done their best to preserve it, using only polished stonework around it and limiting the number of entrance passageways, yet the battered vessel still wore a layer of dust. And battered it was, even ripped open in places. What did it take to soar in the stars? Hilt wondered. What kind of protection? Quite a bit, judging from the twisted tongues of metal half peeled from the hull, and so much metal, more in one place than anyone alive had ever seen, despite the fact that much of the precious material currently in circulation had been scavenged from fragments of Omen left on the mountainside after its crash. What a calamity that must have been, Hiltz thought, observing its size. It was a wonder both ship and mountain had survived. Ileana claimed the first steps inside for herself, as he had known she would. That was fine with Hiltz. He was content to follow along with one of the glow rods Jay had brought. Seeing the Kashiri quaking timidly on the marble floor outside the hatch, Hiltz waved him in. "It's a sacrilege to be here," Jay stammered. "I'm a Kashiri, not worthy—" "Forget about that. We need more light." Hiltz found Ileana in a forward section of the vessel. There, as every place else aboard, Omen had seen a catastrophe. The ceiling overhead was bowed and buckled. Forward windows were shattered, their panes twisted outward. Had something knocked them out from within? Hiltz had no idea. Nor had he any notion of what he was looking at on either side. Smooth ebon panels alternated with ruptured ones, exposing crisped, wiry guts exposing the crisped, wiry guts of the ship. Hilt studied one and then another, recognizing the Sith characters, but not all of the terms. Telemetry, hyperspace, astrogation. They read as magic words to him. Scholars with the tribe had attempted to keep the knowledge of space travel alive, but that had faltered like everything else in recent centuries. Ileana tapped repeatedly at the black panels, as if pressing harder would bring the ship to life. Yes, she'd be looking for a way off-world, Hiltz thought, like everyone else. The woman slammed her fist on a panel, cracking it. "Nothing works here." "No," Hiltz said. "One thing works." At the rear of the bridge, Jay knelt, spellbound, before a gently glowing display. Sith numbers appeared on its face, one melting into the next as seconds passed. It was the device their beloved sandpipes had been designed to emulate. Omen's chrono. "It's still working," Ileana said, stupefied. Hilt shrugged. Everything aboard the vessel required some kind of energy. Maybe the timekeeping device didn't use much. He stepped closer and touched the hypnotized Kashiri's shoulder. "Today, the day you thought it was, Jay?" Jay's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Finally, his voice dry, he responded, "Yes. The sandpipes were off by 8 days, just like my theory." Hearing the words trail off, Hiltz looked fondly at his clerk. "Very good, Jay. I'm impressed." He and Jay had spent their entire lives studying big questions, knowing they'd never learn whether their solutions were correct. Here Jay had seen his calculations vindicated, once and for all. It struck Hiltz as strange. It was wrong to think that Sith and Kashiri could aspire to the same goals, and yet he and Jay had, and now Jay had his answer. Hiltz felt a sudden pang of jealousy and averted his eyes to the center of the room. What he was looking for wasn't here. "Was this where the command chair went?" Ileana pointed to a bare platform. "The thing you came here to find?" "I always knew it wouldn't be inside Omen," Hiltz said, stepping toward the dais. "I figured you just had to have a look around." It was well known from the Kashiri paintings that Corson had removed his captain's seat to the colonnade on days when he received visitors. It certainly wasn't out there now. Nor here. Ileana looked anguished. "I don't understand. With such a ship, why did Corson move everyone off the mountain to Tav?" She loomed over Hiltz as he squatted beside the empty spot. Maybe their generation couldn't have repaired it, but to stop working entirely and leave? I was right. Corson was a fool. He wanted the tribe to commit to their lives on Kesh, Hiltz said. He knew better than anyone what shape the ship was in. They weren't going anywhere. You saw the room outside us. There's no way Omen can leave unless they dismantle the place. They built the shelter around it. He stepped to the gaping hole forward and looked out at the stone walls beyond. This isn't a stable for an Uvok, Ilyana. It's a tomb. Remembering the face from the Testament, Hiltz imagined Corson's voice describing his strategy. Corson would have ordered the enclosure to protect it from the elements, and the other castaways would have agreed. But once the different ones, Ravelans, grotesque people, were out of the way, Corson would have increasingly turned the survivors' attention toward ruling Kesh. That was the best they could hope for. Sealing the temple and leaving the mountain ended the temptation. Until now. Movement caught his eye and he gasped. Someone's outside. Hiltz ducked beneath the shattered viewport. Lights outside cast long shadows against the curved walls. Ilyana violently shoved Jay to the deck and dashed forward to join Hiltz. The two carefully peered out as figures entered the temple bearing glow rods. The caretaker counted 8 newcomers that he could see, but he could hear the voices of others. Some he recognized instantly. There was bald and burly Corson Bentado, recognizable as the leader of the Corsonites, but badly damaged from the past week's violence, having lost his left hand somewhere. 3 other figures wore the once shiny tunics of the Golden Destiny, the faction obsessed with the tribe's off-world origins. Their flashy uniforms had lost their luster. And one looked familiar. I know that man, Hiltz whispered to Ilyana, pointing to a young blonde warrior. Edel Vry had been one of the few regular visitors to the museum, fascinated by Corson-era architecture as well as tales of Omen, a topic he could go on and on about. Hiltz expected Edel to be delighted to see the spacecraft of his dreams at last, and yet the figure outside wore a sour expression. It sickens me, he heard Edel say. This thing, is nothing but a carrier for chattel. Hiltz nearly stood at Edel's words, but Ilyana pushed him back down. Together they listened as Edel and his companions, some from different factions, spoke with disdain of the damaged starship. A carrier for vermin, you mean, another said. It began our race's imprisonment here, Bentado added. It is an omen, but for despair. You're right, Edel said, his words echoing through the chamber. We have to destroy it. Hiltz and Ilyana looked at each other, stunned. Outside there were rousing calls of agreement from people who never agreed about anything. It is right, Bentado's deep voice boomed. A last defiant stab. Our people will end, but they will end with a fist clenched in hatred against fate. I know just how to do it, Edel said. Edel replied. One last act of cooperation. We will succeed. Hiltz felt sick as he heard boots on the floor outside, tromping toward the exit. He'd expected the newcomers to try to board Omen as they had, but this was something else. Had the rush towards self-destruction claimed everyone's senses? Yes, he thought. Yes, it has. They can't destroy anything this size, Ilyana said, her voice raspy as she looked around the bridge. There are no explosives left. What are they going to do, stab it with lightsabers? Hiltz didn't know, but he knew not to doubt Edel. He'll find a way, he said, rising. He grabbed her arm. Quickly, we have to find what Corson left behind before it's too late. And that is the end of chapter 2. Okay. Jumping into chapter 3. And I see Vesper wrote something else, but I'm going to save it toward the end, for the end. So, chapter 3. Edel had been thinking about this plan for a while. Hiltz realized as he peeked through the narrow window of the dome. Situated atop the roof of the temple, the fancy cupola offered a clear view of the main quadrangle, and from here Hiltz had observed all the activity and wonder. With the sun setting over the vast western ocean, the Sith warriors' workday was just beginning. At least 30 were here, some in the garb of their different factions, others had abandoned their partisan dress altogether. Many had arrived while Hiltz and his two companions awaited their opportunity to leave Oman without notice, and all were now engaged in a massive engineering project, or rather a demolition project. Warriors clung to the sides of the giant watchtower, looping long leather cables around the supports. The tower was a marvel, improbably top-heavy, with observation decks high aloft. It wouldn't take enormous effort to bring it down. Hilt saw exactly where it was intended to land. Edel stood on the plaza directing warriors on how to position their Uvok teams. With the beasts on the ground and in the air pulling the cords in unison, Edel clearly expected the heaviest deck of the tower of the stone tower to land right on top of the chamber that held Omen. That room was well constructed, Ileana said, looking over his shoulder. Could this harm it? It'll crack like an Uvok egg under a hammer, Hilt muttered. He knew Edel, intense but studious. Edel knew how the classical structures had been built, and he'd seen Omen's lair up close. They may not blow the ship up, but they'll definitely bury it. Ileana sneered. It was already dead and buried. Hilt could only shake his head and stare. There were so many out there, all working at their common destructive cause. He even recognized Nira, deformed leader of the Force 57, throwing her enormous muscled back into the work alongside the other warriors. Aren't some of those your sisters of Sela with her? Hilt squinted into the creeping darkness. Don't you lead them? Won't they listen to you? Haven't you seen what's been going on lately? No one follows anyone now, Ileana said, shrugging. But they'll work together in this. People need a mission. Hiltz blinked. The unity he'd hoped for in the cause of crushing all hope. He'd studied Ileana. You could live by joining them. Not likely. Who do you think took Bentado's hand? From behind in the anteroom, a loud click. I've worked the latch, caretaker, Jay said, rising. The massive inner door to the rotunda groaned open for the first time in centuries. Small fingers, Hilt said. Helps to have someone following you. Jay waited for his master and Ileana to enter before following, fresh glow rod in hand. Where Omen's home below had a humongous occupant, nothing stood in this smaller rotunda but a single chair beside a brazier. Hiltz stepped eagerly toward it. Yes, it was what he thought it was, the command chair, the Grand Lord's throne. Close enough to touch the seat, Hiltz paused and looked around. It was a strange place for it, alone here in this room atop the temple. He squinted into the void above. Jay's single glow rod wasn't enough to light the place. Do you see something up there? I think I know, Ileana said. Grabbing Jay, she violently ripped the tunic from the startled clerk's back. Without a word, she balled the cloth up and tossed it into the brazier. With the help of the flint tool chained to the side, she soon had a small fire going, smoke wafting up to slits near the ceiling apex. Made chilly, Jay fretted. Someone outside might see the smoke. I don't care, Ileana said. I've got nothing left but to fight it out. Hiltz looked at his side and shrugged. It did get surprisingly cold up here, cold enough to discomfit even a traveler from the stars. Just stay close to the fire, he said, before glancing upward. For a moment he thought he saw the stars outside. Then with another look he realized that he had, in a way, a planetarium. Embedded in the rounded ceiling were crimson stones glowing warmly as the fire below flickered. One by one he picked out the stars of Kesh's summer sky and saw many smaller ones he wasn't familiar with. Are those lignin crystals up there? Ileana asked. Hiltz laughed. Why not? Omen's crew would have had plenty of them. He turned his attention back to the chair, the missing piece from the starship's bridge. It wasn't hard to imagine Yaru Corson here, sitting at night, contemplating his people's return to the stars. He thought again about Corson's line from the Testament. What was behind the throne? Nothing here that he could see. Just empty wall. Was it something in the star map? No, that was above. Indifferent to the display overhead and to any sense of history, Ileana flopped onto the chair, throwing her booted legs over the armrest. Hiltz gawked at her. You're going to sit there? I'm not going to. I am. Casually, she unclipped her lightsaber and tossed it from hand to hand. Those people outside will either bring the temple down underneath us, or they'll find us here. If I'm going to wait, I'm going to sit. Whatever. You know this room is pretty useless, Ileana said, cracking her wrists. It only shows the sky at one time of the year. Hilt nodded. It was more decorative than useful, but his thoughts were still on the chair and Corson's testament. Do you have a knife? Of course, Ileana said, using the force to whip a glass blade from a compartment in her boot. The weapon paused in midair, hovering near Hilt's face. Thanks a lot, he said, taking it and kneeling behind the chair. Behind the throne. Tentatively, almost fearfully, Hiltz slid the tip of the shikar into the tough skin of the back of the seat. The Sith didn't outfit their ships for comfort, he saw, but even the rough hide of the command chair was no match for the Kashiri blade. Careful to cut no more than he had to, Hiltz withdrew the knife and slipped his hand inside the furnishing. Continuing to sit, Ileana watched the old man fish around aimlessly, his arm up to his elbow inside the chair. You look like a fool, she said. He felt like one, too, and was about to stop when his hand reached the level of the armrests. There's something in there, he said, sewn inside. He drew his hand out quickly, ripping the upholstery more than as he did. The glass vial contained a single rolled-up sheet of transparent film, flimsier than the thinnest parchment the Kashiri had ever crafted. As he brought it closer to the failing fire, figures began to take shape. What's that writing in? Ileana asked, suddenly interested. It's the old cant of the Tapani, the language of the humans under Sith rule, Hilt said, the language of Corson's mother. How do you know? Because I studied it, and she wrote it. He nudged Ileana's legs off the armrest and brought the film as close to the fire as he dared. Takara Corson. Corson's father left her for Jariad's mother. His eyes scanned the page. He'd spent the previous year studying a text on the language. Slowly, surely, he worked it out. It's marked personal, he said. Brought by a trusted courier to Corson. Swallowing, he recited, I know you tire of hearing of my visions, my son. If you do as you always have, I expect you won't read this until your mission is well underway. I'm pleased that you've been given command of an important assignment for Nagaseto, even as it grieves me, as it does all our kind, to know that your victory is for his glory alone. Yes, I've had another of the visions. I saw our descendants ruling a great people one day, free from the Red Sith. We will have something that will be our own. When they are guided well, I see new horizons opening up, new places to conquer. Yaru, only you are wise enough to guide our people. Devor will be his own ruin. I sense strength in his chosen mate, Sela, but that is not enough. You alone know how to manage the ambitions of many, how to shape your anger and sculpt it to fit the purpose ahead. You do have a purpose. Take care. If you guide our people well, they will always have a mission. Hilt drew the letter back from the fire and stared. He didn't even notice Jay's cautious, reverential approach behind him. Look at the time imprint, the shivering Kashiri said, pointing over Hilt's shoulder to figures along the edge. He received this right before Omen left for Fagan. Hiltz nodded as he considered the words. No, Corson wouldn't have wanted anyone to read the message while he was still working for Nagaseto. Hence the hiding place. But for a quarter of a century, Corson had kept the message always near him. I always wondered how he found the strength to go on, he said. Cheerleading claptrap from a doting mother, Ileana said. Even Corson couldn't have believed this nonsense. Hush, girl, he glared at her. She was wise. She saw what we would build, and this proves that our people weren't destined to live as slaves forever. We have a future. Hilt stood suddenly and started toward the exit. Those people out there, if I could read it to them. They won't listen, Ileana said. It's too far gone. I know I wouldn't listen. Hilt stopped before reaching the doorway. He looked at the letter again and frowned. Ileana was right. The sentiments were a balm to the spirits, but the people needed a specific cause, like knocking down a tower and destroying a spaceship. What cause would you rally to? He asked, rolling the letter up and putting it back into its tube. Ileana answered without a second thought. Myself. He could hear more shouts outside, past the anteroom. The wrecking crew would be further along now. Hiltz and his companions couldn't stay. Not here, not far atop Omen's resting place. Wait, Hiltz said, looking to the floor. Jay shivered beside the cooling brazier. What is it, caretaker? This message. This isn't what Corson meant. He looked to the chair where Ileana still sat. Remember the quote, the true power is behind the throne, not in the throne, not behind the one who sits in it. You want to argue semantics now? Ileana shook her head. No, you're looking for precision in the words of a dying fool. A fool smart enough to conquer a whole native people and to train a daughter for war under everyone's noses. No, Hilt said, rolling the tube with the missive over in his hand. This message was important to Corson, but it isn't what he meant. He looked back up to the ceiling where the false stars had faded with the fire. None of this is right. Ileana shifted in the seat. What do you mean? This place. I can't believe Corson spent all his time here, he said. You're correct. This map above, it's not practical. It's decorative. Corson's focus was on building an empire, on Kesh. He wasn't sitting around looking at the stars. Hilt stalked around the room, and Corson, you saw how he looked in the recording. I remember, Ileana said, interest growing as the caretaker grew more animated. He was bleeding to death. The legend says that Corson was mortally wounded outside on the western slope and made his way back to his chair to record the testament. Back here, Jay said. No, Hiltz thought. Back on the shimmering message he'd seen days earlier. No, there hadn't been any background in the image. They had been able to see the chair, but no more. We assumed that he recorded it here when we found the chair, but look how high you are, Yaru. Yaru couldn't have made it up all those stairs with a gaping chest wound. I'm healthy, and I nearly didn't. Ileana stood and looked back to the seat. I don't get it. They moved his chair here after he died? She shrugged. Why, and where would he have gone instead? Hilt stewed for several moments before his aide, now huddled on the floor near the brazier for warmth, piped up. Perhaps there's something in the chamber beneath Omen. Beneath? Hilt blinked in the near darkness of the rotunda. There isn't any chamber beneath Omen. They built the temple over the ship where it came to rest. But the ship landed on a slope, Jay said, and what we saw was completely level. They shored it up with stonework. He fidgeted, counting on purple fingertips before looking up. We entered the temple through an open passage at the 23rd step on the staircase from the middle terrace, but we passed a sealed door at the 7th step. The little Kashiri crossed his arms with satisfaction. Another chamber at the base of Omen's support structure. Ileana rolled her eyes. He counted the steps? He counted the steps, Hilt said, smirking. His momentarily improved mood was cut short by a mild shudder, reverberating through the floor. The impromptu allies outside were getting closer to their goal. What are you waiting for? Let's go! And that's the end of Chapter 3. It hadn't seen a visitor in nearly 2,000 years, and it didn't look like it had seen much traffic when people had lived here either. Unlike Roman, unlike Omen's resting place above them and the celestial dome atop it all, this lower level wasn't a shrine and it wasn't for show. The narrow hallway through the darkness lacked holders for glow rods, and compared with the ornate doors out elsewhere, the entrance to the octagonal room was positively modest. Hiltz and his companions had entered the catacombs after slipping past confusion on the plaza. Cables had snapped, temporarily thwarting Edel's plan to collapse the tower onto Omen. But Hiltz knew they'd figure it out sooner or later. He had to figure out what Corson had meant sooner, which was difficult in the dark. Find some more glow rods, he ordered. Jay nodded and scampered out. Between the few they'd brought and the light from his and Ileana's lightsabers, they'd been able to recognize the room's main feature, a massive stone carved map of Keshta, their continent, dominated one of the walls. Small lignin crystals had been worked into the design to indicate settlements. It was the planetary equivalent of the sky map upstairs. One wall had the doorway, the other six held only large blank slabs of slate, the same size as the Keshta map. I don't like being here, Ileana said, gripping her lightsaber tightly. This is a dead end. Dead is right, Hilt said, looking up. Yaru Corson died here. I can feel it. Ileana's eyes narrowed for a moment. I feel it too, she said. It feels good. Hiltz ignored her, kneeling at the center of the room and bringing his lightsaber close to the floor. Ruts, he said, feeling the stone surface. 4 of them. This is where Yaru Corson's chair was kept at night. He looked to the wall map, and that's what it faced. Why wouldn't they leave Corson's chair here after he died? Maybe Nita wanted anyone who entered in the future to think that Yaru spent all his time contemplating the cosmos and their return. Ileana sneered. Then maybe she should have punched some windows in the room where they'd kept the ship. Hilt stood and walked to the map. Yes, it made sense. This wasn't a fancy place. It was a place for work, where Corson plotted the tribe's management of their new world. He might have brought only his trusted Kashiri aides here to work on the map. Looking back, he squinted through the darkness at the other walls. Humongous black slates pegged to the walls by metal spikes that must have come from Omen. Hiltz could imagine Corson working here, chalking up his plans for the tribe. If the captain's chair always faced the map, and he couldn't imagine otherwise, then nothing was behind the throne at all. Just blank stone panels. He deactivated his lightsaber and stared into the darkness. What did Corson mean? A thought occurred to him. Hiltz took a step away from the map, only to see a flailing figure hurtle into the room, launched from the hallway by a massive force push. Jay! Hiltz yelled as the Kashiri landed meters short of the far wall. The old man scrambled to his aide's side and turned him over, only to see the wounds seared into the clerk's bare chest. The work of a lightsaber, or several. I'm sorry, caretaker, Jay said, coughing as life escaped. I tried to find some more glow rods. Stunned, Hiltz looked to the side where Ileana had already vaulted into a defensive posture. One after another, the figures they'd seen outside Omen charged into the room, lightsabers in hand. Well, well, Corson Bentado said, voice dripping with gruesome delight. So this is where the chief's sister scurried off to. He raised his truncated left arm. I've been looking for you. You're not the only one, barked Nira, alongside Edel and several of his Golden Destiny companions, blocking any escape. Pretty little menace, it's time to be done with you. Let's put her in the tower and watch her plummet, Bentado said. No, said another, gesturing to a disfigurement that Ileana had evidently delivered. Let's chain her to the spot where the hammer will fall. Forget that, Ileana yelled, poised to move. We finish this now. Stop! The caretaker's shout echoed around the room, attracting the newcomer's attention to him for the first time. Cradling his dead assistant in his arms, he yelled again, "Which one of you did this?" "What difference does it make?" Bentado's teeth glistened in the light given off by the glowing weaponry. "He was a Kashiri. His presence profanes this place." "What?" Releasing Jay, Hilt bolted to his feet, feeling anger he hadn't known since his youth. "The Kashiri helped to build this place. And profane? You're the ones trying to destroy the temple and Omen in it." "All life is profane," Nira said. She'd added some fresh scars since the last time he saw her. "You saw our alien masters. You know just how disgusting life can be." Hilt took a step toward the party, only to see Edel step to the front. "I know how you feel about this place, caretaker, but the joke's on us, all of us. Everything we were ever told about the tribe is a lie. It's over. There's no sense in clinging to places like this. It's just one more score to settle. We wipe it out, and then one another." "This isn't the end," Hilt yelled. This isn't the end." "No," Edel said, a chill in his voice. "The end already happened. We just didn't know it." The warriors surged forward toward the center of the room, bowling hilts over as they sought to engage Ilyana, the more dangerous of their prey. Tumbling backward, Hilt saw again the blank slabs on the walls, suspended on their metal spikes. For some bizarre reason, at this moment he found himself thinking the thought he'd had just before Jay had been hurled into the room. Why waste precious metal on hanging chalkboards? Suddenly he knew. With a tremendous effort, Hilt yanked at the metal rods through the force, ripping them from the walls. On 6 sides of the room, the massive stone panels came loose, falling forward and slamming to the floor. Hilt yanked at Ilyana, pulling her clear of one of the falling monoliths. Thum, 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 thum. Seeing the other warriors reeling from the surprise and impact, Hilt reached his feet first and grabbed a glow rod. Turning it toward the walls facing the map wall, he saw what he'd expected to see: the rest of the world. Edelvrai looked at the wall nearest him. What is this?" "It's a map of Kesh," Hilt said, bringing his light close to the display on the far wall. The revealed panels adjacent to the map of Keshta were blank, but the 4 panels on the other side of the room depicted a massive continent dwarfing the place they knew. "It's a map of Kesh's far side. It's the rest of the world." Ilyana gawked. "But there's nothing beyond the oceans. They explored everything after Omen arrived. They only knew what they could see on Uvok back, and in places where Uvok could reach," Hilt said, excitedly running his fingertips across the map. "There were crystals denoting cities here, too, far more than on the familiar map across the room, and Tapani characters etched nearby. This was what was behind the throne," he said, turning to face the others. "This is what Corson meant." As the caretaker looked back to the back, as the caretaker turned let me try that a third time. As the caretaker turned back, the warriors spread across the room, using their lightsabers now for illumination rather than defense. "What's this writing here?" Edel said, frustrated. "There's a lot of it in this spot." "Just a moment," Hilt said, stepping over to the section. It had been etched with a diamond stylus, an artifact he'd remembered puzzling over as curator in the Tav Palace years earlier. "This is Corson's own handwriting." The room fell silent as he studied. There were some new words here which he made out to refer to the Kesh and Kashiri, terms that wouldn't have been known in the Tapani dialect. Corson was evidently a wordsmith along with everything else. Haltingly, he recited as best he could. "Nida, you will know this language from the studies I've assigned you, but you won't know this map. No one does. It's based on the last data recorded by the cams of Omen during our descent across the dark side of Kesh. When I discovered a cam with a working display, I hid the device, transferring over the years what it saw to the map panels here until its power finally gave out. Our people and the Kashiri have thought this continent was all there was, alone in a gigantic sea. Taking control of the continent of Keshta gave our people a purpose, but we've just been on Keshta Minor. This map displays another landmass with us in the southern hemisphere, Keshta Major. Far beyond the range of any Uvok to fly, and with far more people. And yes, there are people. There must be. The crystals represent lights. Lights! Seen on the dark side of the planet. There are cities there. Another whole civilization. Kashiri likely, but perhaps more advanced, and possibly not in fear of the Skyborn. They could add to our power, or could be our enemies. For years, I've secretly annotated the map based on what I could make out before the images died. It's truly another world. I've done all I can now, and my trusted Kashiri are sealing the map panels in advance of our move to Tav. But you or your descendants may one day need a cause that will unite our people. The knowledge I leave here is true power. Envy has driven the Sith to great accomplishments. Now there is again something to covet, something that may be within reach of the properly led. The room remained silent after he stopped reading. Hiltz looked at the words again and the great new map surrounding the text, and exhaled. Awkwardly, he felt a bulge in his vest pocket and produced the glass tube. I have a letter from his mother, too. Standing peaceably alongside Ileana before the new maps, Bentado looked back at Hiltz. He's got more of the same writing everywhere. Are there guides to this language? There were, Hiltz said, until you people destroyed my archives. He shuffled his feet. I'm the only one who knows it now. Hearing his own words, he straightened. I'm the only one who knows it now. This is unimaginable, Ileana said. Why didn't Corson tell anyone? He already had a continent to conquer, Hiltz said, and his feud with Sela and Jeriad was too personal. They wouldn't have been moved by this. He looked at the gathering rivals. But it'll move our people now. If you need Sith to act in unison, give them an enemy. Taking advantage of the peace, Hiltz unrolled the missive from Takara Corson. He read of the destiny of the Tapani humans who had wandered into Sith territory and had been enslaved, and he read of their future, ruling some place on their own, and then another place, and another. If you guide our people well, they will always have a mission. Edel looked dazzled. How will we get there? Everyone in the room knew the problem. The Kashiri weren't a naval culture. The local woods were either too dense to float or too flimsy to bear any weight. It'll be the biggest thing our society's ever undertaken, Hiltz said. We'll never be able to do it if we act like we have been. We'll need everybody. He nodded to the deformed Nira. Everybody. It will require order and discipline, he paused, as in the days of old. Abruptly, Edel snapped off his lightsaber. We will craft the society again, as in the old ways. He stepped toward Hiltz and knelt. You are the caretaker. You alone know the old tongue, and you know the old ways better than anyone. You will guide our people well. Hiltz looked in astonishment at the young man kneeling before him. Edel's fellow Golden Destiny members bowed as well. To the side, Corson Bentado paused and finally nodded, dipping his bald head as he fell to his knees. You have redeemed our faith in Corson. Even Nira knelt. Where no path existed, you found one wide enough for all. Alone you have my trust. Soon only Ileana remained standing, gawking in shock at the sight of her collected assailants, all genuflecting before the dumbfounded museum curator. All hail Varner Hiltz, the new Grand Lord. And that is the end of Chapter 4. And Chapter 5 is very, very short to finish it off. Hiltz had given the previous age its name. Now, with the time of the rot ending, he had also named the era to come, the Hiltz Restoration. He liked the sound of it. The largest surviving faction after the 2-week chaos had been the Golden Destiny, and it turned out to be fortuitous. Like their rivals, they wanted to seize power on Kesh, but they'd always had their eyes set in the right direction, outward. Hiltz couldn't offer them the return to the stars they wanted, but he'd found a new world for them to conquer. Accompanied by Bentado, Nira, and others, they fanned out quickly onto the mainland, announcing the great tidings. The tribe's governing system would be restored and set toward a goal. Hiltz didn't worry about how they'd reach the new continent. As his chief engineer, Edel promised to attack the problem with vigor, studying ways to span distances greater than any Uvok or watercraft ever had. It might take years, decades, or even centuries, but the tribe would succeed. The new Grand Lord did wonder about what they'd find. Had Corson told Adari Val about the new continent? Whether he had or not, if she had somehow reached there with her flight of stolen Uvok, the residents would know the Sith existed. Corson's note was likely correct. The conquest of the new continent wouldn't be as easy as the takeover of the old one. The prospect of the challenge made him feel young again. There was one last thing. It had come to Hiltz almost as an afterthought. As soon as Edel and the others had announced his elevation, Hiltz had seen the fire flash in Ileana's eyes. She'd been the one vying for power, after all, not the caretaker. He wasn't supposed to be the one lifted on high, but after the initial shock, and realizing that Bentado and his companions still felt vengeful toward Ileana for her past actions, he'd thought of the absolute right thing to say to her before all of them. If I am to be Grand Lord, I will need a wife. The surprise hadn't been all hers at first. Hiltz could hardly believe he'd said it. He never knew exactly what she'd thought of it either until now. Here on the sun-dappled colonnade outside the mountaintop temple, tall and regal, Ileana stood across from him, shimmering in a golden gown, product of the labors of the finest Kashiri artisans. Nuptial rituals were always just one excuse for a celebration, as far as tribe members were concerned. Fidelity meant little to a Sith believer, but property meant a whole lot, and Ileana had just attained quite a bit. Several of her former sisters of Sela were here in their own regalia, he saw. Evidently, this turn of events had patched up every rift on the continent. Twirling Sela's ancient commitment band on her finger, Ileana smiled weakly for the others, and then glared privately at Hiltz. "We both know this is ridiculous," she whispered. "If you think I'm going to be all thankful to you for saving me." "I would never think that," Hiltz said. That seemed to satisfy the woman for a moment, but as tribe members passed them on the receiving line, Ileana had a sudden thought. "Wait," she said, under her breath. "If you're restoring the old ways, isn't the consort of the Grand Lord put to death on his passing?" Her eyebrows flared. "That's right, isn't it? It's in Corson's testament." "Oh, is that in there?" Hiltz looked up at her mildly. "I'd forgotten." Ileana smoldered. Hiltz looked at his young bride and grinned. There would be wise leadership so long as he lived, and he could live another 40 years, because there would be someone to make sure he did. Powerful, youthful, and devious, fighting all his battles. Surely some had assented to his elevation because he was an easy target, but she wasn't, and the only way to protect her own life was to protect his. Hiltz looked up at the statue looming over them both. There he was, Yaru Corson, wise beyond all, even in matters of marriage. Behind the statue stood row after row of cleanly dressed tribe members, at attention and waiting their turn to meet the new leader and his bride. Every surviving Sith on Keshta Minor must be here today, Hiltz thought. Some were worse for wear for the past month's riots, but they were here, celebrating both his marriage and the last day of the festival of Nita's Rise. This would be one feat month no one would ever forget. Okay. Along the sides of the colonnade stood hundreds of Kashiri, cheering and applauding. Waving to them, Hiltz received a collective squeal of approval in response. The Kashiri couldn't yet become part of the tribe themselves, but Hilts would change that. Many of them had useful talents, and the tribe might well need the help of all in the challenge ahead. For a moment he imagined what poor little Jay would have looked like in the uniform of a tyro or saber. Hilt smiled at the thought. It would take a while, but he would do it. Reading history had been his life. Now he would write his own. The tribe would go on. And that is the end of Secrets. And then we have a map. Unfortunately, it's turned sideways. So I'm going to show it to you, but I can't turn it. So here we have it. So this is the continent of Kesh, 2,000 years after the death of Yaru Korson. This is the continent that all this has taken place on. In fact, all of the Lost Tribe of the Sith books have taken place on this continent. Okay, so now, like I said, I was going to look at what Vesper had to say here. Also, when Socrates brings out mathematics, he is attempting to pull a fatality on whoever he is discussing things with. It is like a boxer putting a horseshoe in his glove. Someone is going to get knocked out. I guess it is like a giant, I don't know what you were referring to. I guess it's like a giant glow stick. The lightsaber would be like a giant glow stick, only it's a deadly one. But anyway, yeah, that leads us to Pandemonium for next week. The first few chapters anyway, it'll be at least 3 readings. It's like 17 chapters. And it looks like 25 years have gone by. So it's the year 2975 BBY. So, all right. That'll be that for tonight. And it's just as well my voice is gone anyway. So I'm going to see who's around, and we'll go raid somebody. See if, yeah, well, Mr. Blitzer's on. He's been on for 3 hours, so he'll probably be on for a while. We'll go ahead and go over and give him a visit. So bear with me a minute, and I will take us on over there. See you there. If not, have a good night.
Feeling shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated.